Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Sideshow's Dengar 6-scale figure. Let's see how he turned out. Okay, first up as always, let's take a look at the packaging. It's standard fare, exactly what we've come to expect from both Sideshow and Hot Toys as far as design is concerned. However, the way that Sideshow incorporates product photography with the packaging, other companies need to take note because this is genuinely the way that it needs to be done. Once you open it up, you see even one more example of that. Very minimalistic. I'm really digging what they've done. I'd like to, of course, there's always that window onto the figure itself. So yeah, but let's get into the guts of the thing. This is everything that you're going to get with Dengar. Look at that costume. Great, great paint on all that armor. It just looks old, it looks battered. You've got some really nice fabric elements incorporated into the leg armor there. That gun, there are so many parts to that gun. You really need to take a good solid look at that. I'll show you a little bit of that in detail later. Base is pretty bare bones. Not much there. That's fine. It doesn't need to be. Backpack, highly detailed. Love all the hands. They're very basic, exactly everything that you're going to need. Nothing really frilly. I broke it already. One of those little buttons on his head wrap, I broke that off. That really sucks. But I'll glue it back on, no big deal. The head wrap is equal parts plastic and fabric, and it works really well. The paint is such that it's barely distinguishable. You can see a slight variation in paint tone, just especially there in this light. It's a little bit lighter on the plastic part on the top than it is on the fabric part on the bottom. That's not a deal breaker. It still looks outstanding. Getting down to the posing, the wrist pegs in mine were jammed into those arms pretty darn tight. The left hand came out just fine. The right hand, though, the hand popped off the wrist peg itself. I wound up having to use my trusty, rusty heat gun to get it to pop free. But again, not a deal breaker. This is a fairly common occurrence with pretty much any 6-scale figure. Note to watch out for, this shoulder armor, the pauldrons that they used, that's the means that they have of applying those. They used what looks to me to be the same elastic that they used to use on the Stormtrooper armor. Over time, that wore out and went south. It just became really loose, like a sock that fails to pull up after a certain number of wearings. It's possible that they're using an upgraded version of that material. I don't know. I'm not privy to such details these days. But that's something to keep an eye on. If it does go south on you sometime in the future, this is something that you can do. Just go out to, I'm sure that there are places out there where you can buy such things and just cut, glue, whatever you have to do in order to make it work. One thing that I noticed almost right away was that the backpack it made the figure just a little bit cumbersome to work with, even on the stand. So I took that thing off. Something you're going to want to pay really close attention to when you're messing with it is the distance between the upper part of the torso armor and the, for lack of a better word, we'll call it a codpiece. Try not to let that codpiece fall too far down. It exposes a little bit of the fabric in the middle and it just looks awkward, and I don't really think that it's screen accurate. I'd have to take a look, and I really didn't do so. But if you go by the look of the photographs on the packaging, and I know that Kevin Ellis, who's, when last I checked, was in charge of Sideshow's 6-scale stuff, he's pretty diligent about making sure that those costume elements look good in the product photography. Again, you can see here that I've repaired that broken button thing. Not a problem anymore, but yeah, be careful when you're handling that head. Just try to only work it with your fingers and thumb on the plastic part. The gun was a little challenging to get into the holster. That holster is very snug. I actually approve of that. I think that too snug is better than too loose. It does break in over time, so it's not going to be a problem for very long if it ever was a problem in the first place. One more thing to call out is that the padding, and combined with the armor, can make certain movements in the range of motion a little bit stiff, a little bit challenging. You can make it work. You just have to work at it a little bit. Be cautious, be very, very careful. My impression of this figure is that it's very sturdy, and I don't think you have to worry about breakage overly much. Sideshow is really on point about that. Their figures aren't typically as fragile as the offerings from, say, Hot Toys, for instance. I was watching an episode of Clone Wars last night. I think it's called Bounty. It's from season 4, I believe, in which Asajj Ventress joins up with a pack of bounty hunters that include the likes of Boba Fett, Bossk, and Dengar was there for a bit. It was a much younger version of Dengar, and it got me to thinking about how by the time we see Dengar, he's middle-aged, maybe even beyond middle-aged. He's got a bit of a paunch. He's clearly a bounty hunter on the back end of his career. Just the difference between the lithe, nimble, very agile and capable bounty hunter in that episode of the Clone Wars, and the old man, scarred and battle scarred, and his dingy, rusty armor that we see here and in The Empire Strikes Back. It tells a story in and of itself. This guy's been around the block a time or two, and he has some stories to tell. I really get the impression that the development team at Sideshow, both all the painters, the costume makers, everything, they had it in mind of the type of character that he is. And just so much as the original costume on screen told the story, they did their best to duplicate it here. It's a fine figure on its own, I have to say, but in all seriousness, if you really want to make this work, you should really do everything you can to acquire all 6 of Sideshow's Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters. Just take a look at this here. Honestly, how good does that look? Hope you enjoy the review. Until next time, be good to your plastic.